The model that prevails in the world right now, the prevalent model in the media, in the field of psychology, wherever you look, is I'm going to call the outside in model of stress. The outside in model of stress. And within this model, stress is like particles in the air. And it's kind of like the germ idea. So you've got these particles in the air, and in some places, the particles are very dense, and that would be a stressful area. So in the diagram that you have in your CD or on your DVD, there's a picture of that model, and you'll notice there's a building there, and there's an office building. There's a lot of stress particles around that building. See, you go into that building, you're going to pick up stress the same way a person picks up a cold from germs. See, now on the left-hand side of the model is a mountain and two people climbing the mountain. You'll notice not very many stress particles there. So if you go there, you're not going to have as much stress. And then in the middle of the diagram, you'll notice there's a person there, and they've got enormous stress around them, stress particles around them. You get near them, you're going to get stressed out. This is the model. It's like you catch stress from these events and circumstances. You see? So you and I are just living our lives, and we get near this stress, and all of a sudden we're stressed out. That's the model. Okay? And given this model, there's two solutions. And this is what the world would say is the answers to stress. Solution number one is stay away from stress particles. Don't work in an office building. Be a carpenter, somewhere where you can work away from stress. And a lot of people have designed their lives so that they don't, so that their level of involvement in life isn't what they ideally like it to be, but it's a trade-off that they have less stress. So some people limit their involvement because they don't want to get around these stress particles. The other solution, given this model, is stress management. So you take as a given, well, I'm working in this building, I'm going to have a certain amount of stress, or I'm involved with this person, I'm going to have a certain amount of stress. So I'm going to release that stress. I'll pick it up during the day, and then I'll release it at night. I'll meditate, I'll exercise, I'll go to a therapist, I'll sing. Singing releases a lot of stress for me. They have all their activities that eliminate the stress after the fact. Now, believe me, I'm not against any of it. I think meditation's a wonderful thing. Yoga's a wonderful thing. Exercise is wonderful. Singing is wonderful. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. I'm just saying that stress elimination, if you step back from it, doesn't make sense. It's like putting a bucket under a leaky roof. Sure, it catches the water, but the water's coming down still. You've got to do something about the roof, or it would be like a steam valve in a heating system. You've got to get at the furnace in order to really accomplish something. So this is the outside-in model of stress, and this is generally the way the world sees it. And a nice example of it is if you take a stress test. They have these stress tests, and the stress test weights all the different events in life, like a divorce and moving and a new job, And you take a stress test and it tells you how much stress you should have. It doesn't evaluate you, it evaluates the events and circumstances in your life. And if you have more stress than that, the doctor says, well, you got too much stress. And if you have less stress, the doctor might say, hey, wake up and smell the coffee. You know? You're living in denial, you know. So that's a perfect example of how the world sees it, that they would rate events and circumstances in terms of how much stress there is, or in my diagram, how many particles are there around that event. I'm going to talk about the inside-out model of stress, which I'm suggesting is a true understanding of what stress is, where it comes from, and how people can lower or eliminate the stress in their life. Okay, so this is the model that I'm saying is really a helpful model and an accurate model and a truthful model. And you'll notice in the diagram that came with your CD, or if you have a DVD, you'll notice on the screen that you have the exact same features as you had on the other model. You have your building, and you have your two people in the middle, and you have your mountain on the left with the two people climbing the mountain. But what you'll notice is dramatically different is the stress particles are in the thought bubbles of the individuals. There's absolutely no stress particles in the air, near the building. All the stress is inside the thoughts and the minds of the people in the picture. See, so rather than the idea that you catch stress from events and circumstances, I'm suggesting, in no uncertain terms, that unbeknownst to us and innocently, you and I are generating the stress. It's being manufactured inside our minds via thought. You see? And this is, so here, we don't have to avoid anything in our lives. We don't have to avoid our involvement in our lives. We don't have to release stress on a regular basis because we take it as a given. Given that we're generating it within our own minds, all we have to do is understand how that happens so that we're not generating it. It's not affecting us the way it is now. You see? So that's the essence of this model, is that for people in the inside-out model of stress, people have to look inside where it's generated and get an understanding of how that's happening. And once they understand how that's happening, their level of stress will go down. They'll have a learning curve. See, in the first model, there's no learning curve because it's too late already. The stress particles are out there. I mean, what are you going to learn? You're going to learn how to avoid them or how to release them, but you can't affect the amount of stress in that first diagram. Here, you can have a learning curve regarding your tendency to take on stress, your tendency to generate stress within your own mind via your own thinking. You see? So it's a very hopeful model, and it's very empowering. It's very scary for human beings to feel like their emotional well-being is at the hands of events and circumstances beyond their control. That is not a nice picture. That is not a nice thing for human beings to face. Okay? It is nice for human beings to say, wait a minute, I have everything to do with the feelings of stress, the tension that I'm experiencing. I have everything to do with that. And I can have a learning curve and I can understand things that will significantly affect how much stress I end up with. You know how I said earlier that that there's an understanding about stress that has the potential to significantly reduce the stress in the world. And that understanding is kind of encapsulated in that model. But I'd like to talk about the understanding itself. In other words, what do we understand about stress? What do we know about what the source of stress is? What do we know about what protects people from having a lot of stress in their life? What capabilities do we have as human beings to have very low stress lives? I'm going to talk about that now, and I'm going to make a very odd statement to start out with, and that is that stress does not really exist. It just appears to exist. So when we experience stress, all it is our thinking creating a feeling of tension. Okay? In a way, it's like I'm going like this. I'm saying, gee, I got a little headache here. I wonder if it's genetic. Maybe it's something I ate earlier. I didn't get much sleep last night. Maybe that's it. Okay, that's essentially what stress is. It's inflicted by our own thinking because human beings, every thought they have is linked to a feeling. The feeling is like the shadow of the thought. They may not know what the thought is, but they'll know what the feeling is. If you feel sad, you're going to have a sad thought. It's impossible for human beings to have a happy thought and a sad feeling. And human beings think all day and all night, every day of their lives, from the moment they're born. We are thinking creatures, and every thought carries a feeling.